Hey everyone, this is Adam Elenbaas from Nightlight Astrology, and today we continue our Planets in Profile series by looking at the moon in the sign of Taurus. So those of you guys who follow my channel for a while know that the Planets in Profile series, we take each of the planets through the 12 signs. We've done Venus, Mercury, and Mars. This is now a series devoted to the moon through the 12 signs. We already did the moon in Aries. Today, moon in Taurus. So that is our agenda for today. By the way, stick around at the end of the episode because Kaylee Haynes will be back doing some of her amazing spoken word poetry and adding or deepening really our understanding of the moon in Taurus through her artwork. So if you enjoyed that part of the first episode in Aries, and lots of people did, be sure you stick around at the end because Kaylee will be coming back to share some of her artwork. So that is our agenda for today. Before we get into it, don't forget to like and subscribe. Share your comments and reflections, especially if you have the moon in Taurus. Help us understand what you have experienced or add to our understanding today by contributing your own thoughts and reflections. We always appreciate it when you guys do that. You can find a transcript of today's talk on the website, nightlightastrology.com. And when you go over to nightlightastrology.com right now, you guys know that we are in the process of enrollment season for the next class, Ancient Astrology for the Modern Mystic, my first year program. There are 4 years worth of professional curriculum that we host through the Nightlight Astrology School. The first year course starts in November on the 18th again. And so if you want to jump into that course, you can enroll now. If you scroll down on the first year course page at nightlightastrology.com, you will learn more about what the curriculum includes. It is a foundational course in ancient Greek Hellenistic astrology, shares a lot of the same roots with Indian astrology, and will give you a really amazing foundation for understanding why we do everything that we do in astrology, where everything comes from. You may have, memorized themes and adjectives for houses, signs, planets, but where do houses, signs, planets come from in the first place? And how is the whole system built philosophically? Once we understand that, we have not only an amazing set of techniques and tools that we use for delineating charts, but we also have a grasp on where they all come from, which is what grants us intuitive power as astrologers. And that's really, really important. Ancient astrology is also, if you already have a background in sort of modern archetypal depth psychology and archetypal astrology, this class is going to help you develop predictive abilities. The half of astrology is being able to do something like karmic analytics, while the other half is about being able to help people unpack the interior psychological meaning and experience of their chart and transits. So we're looking at doing both. But what one thing that ancient astrology really gives us is the ability to understand the sort of the karmic fated events and circumstances of life, the themes, the people, the places that we will likely encounter. And so ancient astrology is really good for sharpening your ability to predict and describe the destined events of a lifetime, in addition to being able to, our course also, of course, the program will also help you develop the skills to be able to describe character, personality, and psychology. But both are really necessary. Anyway, there's 30 classes on the year. Everything meets live via webinars, but you can also attend remotely if you can't attend the live webinars. Everything's kept for you on a website, so you can download, keep it, watch it at your leisure, take the program at the pace that you want to, or attend live. At the bottom of the screen, you'll find that there are several payment options. Early Bird saves you $500 off. There is a payment plan you can use to spread the tuition out over 12 monthly installments. That's a really helpful plan because that gives you just a little bit of space every month. You don't have to have a big cost up front. And then there's tuition assistance. That we're really excited about. We still have plenty of spots available. There will be fewer of them the closer we get to the deadline. So make sure you apply early if you need that. That is for people who, for one reason or another, need a little help because you don't want to push yourself outside of your means to take a course. We understand people come from a variety of different financial backgrounds and situations. So we want people who want to study astrology taking our programs, that we don't think people should be priced out. So if you could use a little help, use the tuition assistance. We'd be glad to work with you. Okay, any questions you have about the program, email us info@nightlightastrology.com. On that note, let us get into the moon in Taurus. I think that the moon in Taurus is from a traditional standpoint, it is one of the, along with Cancer, it is the most well-dignified place that the moon has in the zodiac. You might have like a separate talk on dignities, maybe a separate series where we could visit the dignities of the planets. But I'll describe it a little bit today. Anyway, we've got this slick presentation from our sort of like chief curriculum developer. Once I make the curriculum, I have someone who develops it into these presentations. Her name's Delia. So thanks to Delia for making these beautiful slides. In today's video, we're going to look at the moon in the sign of Taurus. And we need to start, there's some preliminary information that we need before we can piece together the archetypal meaning or significance of the moon in Taurus. You have to understand the nature of the planet first. The moon's universal significations are those that represent the broadest philosophical meanings or the broadest symbolic application for the individual soul. So on that big universal level, the moon was representative of the realm of fortune, which means the basic circumstantial flow of events in everyday life. Everyday life. If you think about what happens from the time you get up to the time you come back home in the evening from work, all of the interesting things that pop up. I mean, sometimes life is just very mundane and it's all very repetitive and it's all very predictable. But the moon is sort of about the constant fluctuation of events and circumstances as they change each and every day. So the moon represented the realm of fortune, the everyday ebb and flow of events in the material world, as well as the constant changing of our environments, our mood, our emotions, our mind, our body, and again, material circumstances around us. What a coworker is, coworker smells like onions, that affects your mood. You bark at your boss, you get fired, right? That's the moon's world. The moon's world is the world of kind of the ebb and flow of everyday events that's constantly moving around us like water we're swimming in that we don't even recognize. So the moon has a lot to do with the kind of environment that our lifetime takes place in. Like if you think of the life as something happening on a stage, the moon is like the stage, the set, it's or the setting. So this is kind of the broad meaning of the moon. Now, by contrast, the moon also has topical significations, which are much more specific or concrete, specific people, places, and things. The moon, for example, topically represents things like body, the body, or bodies, or the physical body, mothers, women, home and family, ancestry, tribe, the village, clan, the local culture that you're a part of, or cultures that you're not a part of. The moon can represent marriage and pregnancy and childbirth, also anything that we nurture or devote ourselves to, and things as concrete as food and cooking. And there's many more things, but all of these are like the topical significations of the moon. So for that level, on that level, it becomes somewhat difficult to generically describe what the moon in any sign means, because in your lifetime, if you have the moon in Taurus, that will come to represent a lot of very specific things, and it will also come to represent things as broad and sort of overarching as the environment and the characteristics or themes that somehow describe or define the environment from birth to death. So, the moon is sort of describing the ecosystem of your life, but it's also describing things like as concrete as potentially your mother, or the kinds of homes you live in, the kinds of communities that you're a part of, and so forth. Now, the significations of the moon, when we then put the moon into any given sign, are modified through the qualities of that sign. And this is where we also get the dignity categories from for all of the planets. So the meaning of a sign is most primarily related to its hosts, and then secondarily by the various qualities of the sign it occupies. So for example, when we put the moon in any sign other than Cancer and Taurus, it's going to express itself through the nature of the ruling planet or planets. For example, when we looked at the moon in Aries, we talked a lot about the moon expressing itself through the fiery masculine lens of Mars, and the place Aries also being the exaltation of the sun. That the moon will come to represent characteristics of the Mars, the sort of fiery masculine Mars and sun qualities that are characteristic of Aries. Well, the exception to this general principle of delineation is when the moon is in one of its own signs. When the moon is in one of its own signs, that would be Cancer or Taurus, its domicile being Cancer, its exaltation being Taurus, you get a version of the moon that's very comfortable because it's sort of in a sign that resembles its own nature. The moon in Taurus can thus be understood according to the following features. Taurus is the temple of Venus and the moon. So again, the moon gets to feel nice and at home. It's a solid yin earth sign. So we have the quality of the sign being solid, very stable, fixed, sometimes it's called. Yin being feminine, and the element of earth, which is also considered feminine. But so you get all of that together. You also add in the idea that this is the sign of the bull. It's the second sign of spring. It's the sign within which the light dominant half of the year is stabilizing as the light continues to grow stronger. Light takes over in Aries from darkness. It kind of hands over and becomes dominant for the next 6 signs. In the second sign of spring, the dominance of the light has been established, and now we're stabilizing that kind of spring-like quality as the light is continuing to grow. So this is a springy, earthy, Venusian, stable, light-growing Venus moon type of place. Very lovely. The one thing that I would say that might make it a little bit easier to understand is that the moon is very comfortable in Taurus, but it's a very different kind of moon than a Cancer moon, which is the other domicile of the moon, the other place that the moon feels very comfortable in. In a sense, you get the Taurus moon as a kind of more earthy Venusian moon, which is the moon is very comfortable with, feels very at home in. But this is one way that can be like the simplest way that I would describe what a moon in Taurus is like, is you get a very stable, earthy, sensual, Venusian kind of moon, which again, the moon is very happy with. It's like a very good, you get a lot of very positive expressions of the moon when it is in Taurus. And that's why it's so well dignified or considered exalted. Themes and characters and themes related to the moon in Taurus. You get this kind of earth mother vibe. So it's like the mother, but very earthy, which can also be reflected in sort of like pagan, earthy Venusian goddess worship. It's a very down-to-earth kind of feminine spiritual quality. Like a moon in Taurus, people often have a very earthy, pagan, sensual spirituality or spiritual expression. It's romantic, it's lush, it's artistic, it's fertile, it's sensual. The moon in Cancer it's very different. You get a much more sort of nocturnal and maternal quality in Cancer. It's much more, the Cancerian archetype is, it doesn't have the same kind of sensual Venusian side. I'm not saying that there isn't a very sensual side to the moon in Cancer, but when I think of the moon in Taurus, for example, you get a lot of the images that come to mind are very much more sexual and sort of fertile and earthy. Anyway, stable, solid, reliable, enjoyable. The moon in Taurus is often an indicator of good fortune, great good fortune, or abundance. The environment is somehow lush and sort of fecund and fertile and yields like bountiful fruit, so to speak. There's a warm, easy, smooth, comfortable, grounded quality with the moon in Taurus. Now, that doesn't mean that life is just perfect and easy. If you have the moon in Taurus, there can be a lot of other things in a birth chart than the moon in Taurus that qualify or sort of shift what is being emphasized in a lifetime. Fecund, powerful, sexual, and possessive. There are some dark sides to the moon in Taurus as well. The tendency to be possessive, lusty, hedonistic, greedy, a kind of obsession with power, wealth, and beauty and nice things, which can mean, like straight up power-hungry materialism. But every planet and every sign has light and dark sides. So it's important to cover them, but mostly you get a lot of very positive, sort of rich, lush, feminine sort of goddess themes with the moon in Taurus. You can see that the moon in Taurus will be reflected in terms of people who are appreciators of all that is animal, natural, and primal, which is sort of like if you think about the image of the bull as the sort of the power of heaven as it's represented in the procreative side of nature, this kind of lusty, natural, primal force that is enjoyable and creatively powerful, but can be almost like domineering or controlling at times. The dark side of our lust drive, or something like that, or the sort of the problem of gold. Lust, desire, cravings, and the power of anything habitual. Taurus moons are like things to be stable, which means that there's often an appreciation for things that are habitual. Anything that's wealthy, expensive, or abundant is often associated with the Taurus moon, but also determined, persevering, loyal, persistent, and devoted. You'll find, for example, that Taurus moons are great to have on board if you need someone who will stick with it, remain nurturing, devoted, loyal, persistent, and sort of stubbornly caring for things or managing things or holding things together. Remember, this is a sign of the moon and Venus, and so the ability to harmonize, to nurture, and to keep things together is one of the hallmarks of the moon in Taurus. It's a pagan, feminine, nocturnal, lunar, and deeply mysterious sign. Can't forget that this sign is really also associated with all that is dark, primal, mysterious, and sensual about the earth and the body. But it can also be very simple, safe, stable, and sweet. I always like to say, moon in Taurus is sort of like barefoot barefoot walking through a meadow eating a piece of apple pie, with a sundress on or something. But anyway, you get some of hopefully this gives you just a feel for the moon in Taurus. Now I want to take you through the just charts of people who have just little aspects of their life that sort of pop when it comes to moon in Taurus. So here's Mother Teresa. Now, there's lots of things you could say about these charts. I'm not going to do a full examination of the charts or anything, but I find it interesting that the moon was in Taurus when Mother Teresa was born, along with a bunch of Virgo planets, by the way. Saturn was also in Taurus. And so one of the things that, and I'm not, by the way, anyone that I talk about, I'm not trying to suggest that you have to like these people or that every single thing they did was I'm not here to judge anyone, right? Positively or negatively, just to share details about the life that are archetypal in one way or another. So the moon in Taurus, along with Saturn, one of the interesting things is that she was moved by the disparity between the wealth and safety of the convent that she was living in and the poverty that was right outside of the door in the streets in Calcutta. And so that distinction, that sort of awareness of the distinction between wealth and poverty, which is something that oftentimes Taurus moons will care quite a bit about, even if you have some Taurus moons that are all about the greed or the power or the wealth or the beauty side of things. You'll also find that there's a very kind of egalitarian, compassionate urge to care for people, that the sight of people who are suffering materially is sometimes very hard for Tauruses to bear. And I'll show you some other examples of that too, especially when the moon here is with Saturn, which can make someone more acute of the polarization between people that have a lot and people that have a little. Saturn was the lord of opposites. Anyway, one of her goals in life, however successful she was or wasn't, was to provide for people who were suffering materially, especially like healthcare and stuff like that. How about Jim Morrison? There's that kind of interesting piece about him, is that he's got the moon in Taurus, but opposite Venus and Scorpio, the ruler. So there's kind of the kind of primal, he just has almost the look on his face is almost bull-like to me. But anyway, he had that kind of primal, pagan, sensual, mysterious quality to his music. Of course, struggled with substances as well. Robert Downey Jr., famously one of the most wealthy and financially successful actors in Hollywood of all time. Jupiter also in Taurus, moon in Taurus, of course, struggled mightily with addiction and substances, and has talked at length about the problems of wealth and power and greed and substance. Interesting. Meryl Streep. To me, Meryl Streep is one of the most powerful depictors of female characters in all different like so many different stories where she's embodied women, strong women, women who have to, kind of feel their power somehow by the time the story's over, if they haven't at the outset of the story. But she's like, in my mind, she's one of the, and it's interesting that she has Venus in Cancer as well, because that creates there's an applying sextile. Say it depends exactly on if this is a rectified chart or not. I can't remember, but anyway, Moon Venus mutual reception as well. So the power of the women that she's played and who and what she's done for women in Hollywood has been really significant. Just an example of a tremendously successful female actor who has been known for depicting women and their relationship with power or disempowerment. Carl Jung. I find this one interesting because Jung had the moon in Taurus along with Neptune and Pluto. And of course, he was coming out of the lineage of Sigmund Freud, deeply interested in the unconscious, in the connection between the animal body and the almost like the division between spirit and soul, or the soul and the body, and the interplay between the unconscious world and the conscious. In many respects, Carl Jung was, someone, I once heard James Hillman describe him as the first pagan psychologist. And I thought that was a really nice way of putting it. Anyway, I could go on and on about Jung. He's a complex character, and I'm certainly not here to like idolize or worship anyone. But in terms of someone whose legacy in the exploration of the human soul and the human unconscious and its relation to the body and to the animal instincts, really makes a ton of sense that he would have the moon co-present with Neptune and Pluto in Taurus. Lindsay Lohan. I picked some examples where people just struggled mightily with wealth, substance, sort of that hedonistic tendency, and like having to overcome it or work through it. There's Lindsay Lohan is a very famous example, but Bill Clinton, and I'm just using this very briefly. Bill Clinton, of course, is someone who very famously, and by the way, Monica Lewinsky also has the moon in Taurus, which I find interesting, but if I remember correctly, maybe I'm wrong. No, I think she does. Anyway, Bill Clinton had to very publicly explore that he has this very lusty side, right? And so a lot of what I see in the Taurus moon is the duality between like the animal desire body and the sort of shadow. It's like the bull and the minotaur. There's like a duality. I was actually talking with a woman recently, Emma Frey. You guys might remember her from Patterns in the Stars, and we were talking about the different characters that people play. And this is like a new project she has coming out that we might even do something with on my channel at some point. But there's this weird way in which the shadow of Taurus is like there's the beautiful bull, and then there's the kind of like ravenous minotaur. And I just feel like there's a number of examples, whether it's Robert Downey Jr., Jim Morrison, Lindsay Lohan, Bill Clinton, where the shadow of like lust is it's a big deal. Mick Jagger, I mean, I don't even need to say anything more about that. That's just there's the same kind of pagan, earthy, sensual, feminine power that's just very strong. But you'll see it expressed in so many different ways. Bob Dylan, same thing. He had Saturn, Uranus, Jupiter, and the moon all in Taurus. He was obviously so many things, but I mean, among them, I think one of the things that we know him best as is a folk artist. There's no there's no combination of words that might describe the moon in Taurus better than folk art. And so you have one of the greatest known folk artists of the last, 100 years with the moon in Taurus. Kobe Bryant is a really interesting example because sometimes what happens with moon in Taurus people is, of course, the success can be like really profound, like astronomical levels of success or wealth or prestige or something that the Taurus moon can represent. But also one of the interesting things about the moon in Taurus is the power of habit. Like you will find that some of the people who have the most, that they're well known for the power of like habit leads to success, habit leads to wealth, habit leads to power, etc. Kobe Bryant, I mean, whether, again, not judging him as a human being, just observing, one of the qualities of his life that people have noted is that he was one of the most habitually driven people ever. Now, he's got Mars and Pluto together, right? And he's got an exalted Jupiter in the moon sign too. But that moon in Taurus especially is the hallmark, you'll see it over and over again, of people who are successful because they have a way of staying in controlled, good, positive habits that yield success. It's one of the, like, if I see people with Taurus moons that are afflicted, sometimes I find that, like, you know, they have trouble keeping habits and rhythms, though they really desire to, for example. Anyway, that's another we could kind of go down some rabbit holes here, but I'll keep us going. Frida Kahlo. I mean, to me, again, one of the most powerful sort of female pagan, you know, this kind of dark, primal, mysterious force of her artwork, and the speaking to the state of power or disempowerment in that women experience. I would describe her as a feminist and an artist. I don't know if everyone would agree with that or not, but that's how I would describe her. And moon in Taurus, again, just the power of habit too. Like, her habits as an artist were really incredible. So she has Venus and Pluto together too, and that's the ruler of the moon, and that also speaks to some of that really intense force that comes through her artwork. Like, it's just, her artwork is so moving. But at any rate, the hallmark of many people with that kind of, I want us to think, the way I want people to walk away from this is to remember that there's that kind of nice, easy, stable, sweet, sensual, simple Taurus. There's also this kind of dark, powerful, primordial, pagan earth goddess energy that comes through. Elton John, I think a very similar story. Of course, he has the moon also in Taurus. So there's some other things in his chart that I think stand out, like the Mars-Uranus square, for example, or the moon square Saturn, depending on if I don't recall if this is rectified or not. But another good example of someone who, you know, if you think about like his costumes and his stage presence and performances, a lot of it has just this very powerful, feminine, earthy, sensual, primordial power behind it. River Phoenix is another great example of a Hollywood star who struggled mightily with substance, but also was very compelling for people. You can kind of see the bull in his face in the same way you can see it in Jim Morrison's. But anyway, the primal, earthy, mysterious magic of River Phoenix, very moon in Taurus. Now, of course, he had Saturn there too, which it makes it a little bit more problematic. But of course, he had substance issues that were, you know, really unfortunate, sort of a tragedy. Edgar Cayce, another example of the Taurus moon, along with Neptune and Pluto, kind of like a kind of a similar vibe to Carl Jung's chart. A ton of Pisces energy in his chart, which makes a lot of sense. But Edgar Cayce was fascinated with the, you know, the study of the unconscious, with magic and mystery, and there's a real, like, a pagan depth to his work, as well as there being this kind of mystical, otherworldly quality. But never underestimate the moon in Taurus for its ability to get us interested in things that are like occult-like. And I think one of the reasons for that is that a lot of the most occult-like, what do I want to call them? Like areas of investigation, or like, what I'm trying to say is that throughout history, a lot of occult matters are deeply feminine and earthy and sensual and Venusian. And so the moon in Taurus is naturally interested in like sacred earth mysteries. Anyway, that's Edgar Cayce. Brendan Fraser, I think, you know, again, like, one of the things that I think is really interesting is he recently played a character struggling with, I think I want to call it like a disordered eating. He was just in a movie called The Whale. And it was about a man who's struggling with disordered eating. And I think it was, you know, like severe obesity, and to the point where, you know, like, he couldn't get out of his house or something like that. I don't know. And I think that he won an award for it, or he was nominated for some awards or something. But the point is, one of the things is that Brendan Fraser has actually struggled with various, again, very like physical issues, substance issues, bodily issues. And the moon in Taurus will often, especially in this case, it's opposite Neptune too. But, you know, the moon in Taurus will put us in touch with the power and the problem of the body. And there's almost like a duality of light and dark around desire and pleasure that has to be explored for moon and Taurus natives. You can see the bull in his face too. Then there's Karl Marx. Remember earlier I said that one of the things you'll often find with moon and Taurus people is kind of an acute awareness of people that enjoy a sort of materially opulent or stable life, and those that have very little. That the same duality that's there between, say, pleasure and like lust or something will be present when it comes to those who have a lot and those who have very little. And sometimes that tension between like wealth and poverty, or greed and charity or something like that, will be present in the lives of people who have strong Taurus placements. You know, I'm a Taurus rising, for example, and ever since I started doing astrology, I've always felt really acutely aware of, you know, that some people need a different price point to be able to afford to study astrology. And I've always considered that, as I've learned and studied astrology, to be in part represented by the fact that I'm a Taurus rising. And people with Taurus placements will often be more aware of the difference between like wealth, ease, stability, materially speaking, and the lack of those things that create stress or anxiety or a feeling of instability. And so sometimes you'll see people, you know, Tauruses that have just like tons of wealth and success, but then, you know, sometimes you'll also see the Taurus as almost like there's a kind of charitable humanitarian impulse. Anyway, I'm not necessarily saying that that's exactly who Karl Marx is, but he was someone who was acutely aware of the difference between class and wealth and income and stuff like that. Eckhart Tolle was Tolle, I think that's how you say his name. Moon in Taurus. I find that, you know, again, he actually, I feel like he looks like the bull a little bit. Like he's just had that look. And I feel like it's very characteristic of people with strong Taurus placements, where you can almost see a little bit of the bull in them. But one of the things that Eckhart Tolle has done throughout the course of his life is he has preached and cultivated powerful, positive habits of mindfulness that can create peace and simplicity and stability, psychically, emotionally. So he's someone who I know, like, there's this very spiritual side to him, and you can see like the sun is in Aquarius and stuff like that. Jupiter's in Sag. So he has a kind of like new age sage quality to him. But don't underestimate how powerful how powerful the Taurus moon is when it comes to the simple cultivation of daily habits. You know, daily habits that create stability, peace, ease. And obviously there's this exploration in Taurus between like wealth materially and sort of wealth spiritually. And Eckhart Tolle, though being massively successful and wealthy, is someone who really talks about, you know, the wealth of being present, and that our stability, our peace, our real center of happiness comes from the most powerful, simple habits of mindfulness. Very Taurus moon. Floyd Mayweather Jr., one of the most disciplined boxers of all time. One of the great examples of someone who's, you know, almost flawless, best boxer of all time status, he would say comes from the power of simple, effective habits that he never deviated from. Isn't that amazing? Like, and the same thing with Kobe Bryant, that moon in Taurus. And I feel like it slips under people's radars. They'll look for Mars. They'll say, oh, look, he's got, you know, Floyd Mayweather has Mars opposite Saturn. So that's where the discipline comes from. And like, yeah, that's not a bad, it's a good sign for like a fighter and a boxer. It's someone who can persevere, who has endurance and so on and so forth. But don't underestimate moon in Taurus people when it comes to the power of effective habits that create success. Now, there's Monica Lewinsky with the moon in Taurus. I just had to point out that I thought it was interesting that she also had the moon in Taurus, along with Bill Clinton. Or you have like Howard Stern, right? I would say that he's a really great moon in Taurus example because he's someone that illustrates the sort of perverse, dark side of the, like, you know, he's sort of perverted. I'm just saying that's my own opinion. Who am I? I don't mean to be judgy, but he's got kind of this like dark, perverse side. But he also is someone who is known for making everyone feel a little bit more comfortable with their cravings, their appetite, their sexual nature. He's a sort of pagan bull priest. He's sort of sick and raunchy, you know, and I'm sure is, for many people, is going to be very disturbing. Of course, he has Mars, Saturn in Scorpio as well, right? And a bunch of Capricorn planets. But don't underestimate. I mean, think about how habitual he's been with his show, how every day, how regular he's been. People like the moon in Taurus, they find regular habits and they just do the same thing over and over and over. But I would describe him as, again, as getting us in touch with the primal power of the bull and the shadow of the minotaur. Dennis Rodman, he also has like the bull ring in his nose, right? The same thing. He's a double Taurus, dark moon in Taurus. He's someone who, it was the marriage to Carmen Electra. Remember, he wore the bride's dress and everything. Great example of someone who is making us look, somehow forcing us to look at this kind of dark, earthy, sensual, pagan magic. What it means to be a sexual being, and someone who's powerful. But, you know, there's a way in which the Taurus moon people can make us look at the Minotaur as well. It's interesting. Bill Maher, very similar, a comedian. I wouldn't put him in the same like bin as Howard Stern, but he's someone who's like, you know, he advocates for smoking marijuana. He advocates for people being more real and honest about their sort of earthy, sensual, embodied side, right? So, like, as a comedian, I would say, you know, he's a lot of things, and he's not your cup of tea. Don't worry, because I'm not necessarily the world's biggest fan. You know, he's said lots of things that are offensive too, and probably been, you know, I know some groups of people really don't like him, you know, totally fine. But in terms of the archetype of what buttons he presses, and again, just think of that split between bull and minotaur. The bull is like a sensual, peaceful, sort of fecund image. The minotaur as, you know, comparatively sort of dark and possessed by some kind of instinctual unconsciousness. So he represents some of that in his comedy, both probably in the things that he makes us laugh about, and probably some of the things that he makes people angry about. Galileo. I'm not surprised that Galileo, someone who was considered by some to be a heretic, because of the way that he looked at the earth in relation to the sun. You know, the sun was at the center, not the earth. It's just one of the things that I find really interesting is that, you know, there have been and there were great debates about whether he was a pagan, heretic, or you know, like an atheist, someone who believed only in the realm of matter, you know, or was he someone who should be, you know, considered like a you know, a sort of scientific Catholic or something like that. Anyway, I think, you know, I saw him with the moon in Taurus. You don't know if this is a rectified, probably is a rectified chart, and it's early Taurus. So yeah, maybe he could be a moon in Aries for all we know. But if he was a moon in Taurus, then one of the things that I would say is interesting about him is the way that he makes us look at the earth and our place as humans in the universe, or in the solar system, and the way that his observations about very physical things were taken as, you know, great threats to spiritual things. And that's sort of what the moon in Taurus makes us do. I think that's why you see people like Carl Jung or Edgar Cayce with the moon in Taurus. There's a way in which they're forcing us to consider the relationship between the animal, the instinctual, the physical, the bodily, the unconscious, and something of our spirits or souls. Anyway, so I'm never surprised when I see characters like that. Carlos Castaneda is another great example, someone who wrote a lot about, the magic of sort of southwestern desert shamanism, like peyote and stuff like that. And there's a lot you could say about him as well. There's problems with a lot of these individuals, but that's I think that the earth magic of the Native American entheogenic traditions that he explored is very Moon and Taurus. Jean-Jacques Rousseau, one of the catalyzers of socialist theory. I think that's interesting because it's a little bit like Karl Marx. You get some of that into the interest in class and income and economic disparities. But then you have people like Bernie Madoff who make a ton of money and are very wealthy, but turn out to be this sort of greedy, minotaur. I mean, I'm not trying to judge him, but like that is a dark moon in Taurus, right? It's a story of wealth, greed, and almost like you show this sort of sweet Taurus thing to the world, but there's this kind of like ravenous beast inside. This is sort of the shadow of greed, or addiction and stuff like that. Anyway, there's William Shatner. I didn't know exactly what to say about him, but when I saw him, I was like, I just feel like his mood, his temperament feels very Moon and Taurus. Feels very Moon and Taurus to me. Or Michael Landon, which I felt like is a very similar temperament, also Moon and Taurus. Just the temperament is just kind of like Little House on the Prairie, right? It's just a sort of like slow, steady, sort of earthy. Anyway, those I was just kind of having fun with. How about Amma, the hugging saint, who has the moon in Taurus as well? She literally is thought of as the incarnation of a goddess who goes around hugging people. Florence Nightingale, how about the, sort of known for being the founder or catalyzer of modern nursing, if I have that right, moon in Taurus. Stan Lee, I thought this was really, this was a really interesting one to me because Stan Lee is basically like the czar of the comic book empire. And think about what the comic book empire has go on to become in Hollywood in that past 15 years, I guess. But I find it interesting that like one of the themes that I think you'll find throughout his work is that of the intersection between earthly powers and like the realms of the gods. Like a lot of his characters are gods, or they are, a man become a spider, or like Spider-Man, or my simple point is that there's all of these stories about mutation and the melding of like animal powers with human powers, or the realm of the gods and the realm of earth. He has this grasp, and I'm someone who read comic books a lot as a kid, and I'm not so into the whole Hollywood comic book movie thing. In fact, I'm getting kind of like, I feel sort of assaulted by it at this point. But anyway, but Stan Lee has this like artistic empire that strikes me as having a pretty deep grasp on the human unconscious and the sort of animal primal, natural part of us. And it's also our desire to be somehow more than we are, to reach to the realm of God. Superheroes are sort of godlike. And so the juxtaposition between the sort of Taurus moon in his chart, for example, or like Mars, Uranus, and Pisces, I think that's a really interesting combination. Or even, like Capricorn, the sun opposite Pluto strikes me as Capricorn sun opposite Pluto strikes me as the interest in people like mutating and completely transforming. But at any rate, I thought, like, again, not all of these I totally grasp. As I sit with them, more, I'm sure that more would come up. But for Stan Lee, I just think, well, he made an artistic empire. And a lot of that empire seems to tap into the relation between the human unconscious and the drive to be immortal and the animal powers that live within us and things like mutation and stuff like that. A lot of it's very Taurian. Anyway, so that concludes my list of examples. There's sort of, I try to present things to you guys that I think or good examples, but they're not always examples that I feel like I perfectly understand. So if some of my explanations are lacking, or you feel like you could fill in the blanks a little bit with any of them, please do. I would love that, because that makes for really good conversation in the chat box. Now you know a little bit more about the moon in Taurus. I think that it's one of the most magical moon placements. My wife has the moon in Taurus. I think it was really interesting that, like, one of the biggest transformations of her life, and I know she wouldn't mind saying this because she said it in multiple videos that she's made. I have dog slime on my shirt. Just, Hilda, you can kind of see her paws. You can kind of see the paw. Let me see if I can turn this just a little bit. There's Hilda, sound asleep. She's my superpower. Anyway, Ashley shared this before, but as a moon in Taurus, when she was younger, she was super into like the rave club scene and did a lot of MDMA. And then it got sort of to this point where it was becoming really unhealthy. And so she made the transition into yoga, which at the time for her was about tapping into the same bodily Shakti, but doing it in a way that wasn't creating lots of problems. And that's a very bull-like shadow, right? The ecstasy, the MDMA, the dance club, the rave, it's a very bull scene that can become Minotaur. And then finding yoga for her was this kind of transition into something that could tap into the same power, the Shakti, she studied Kundalini yoga for a while too. But then it holds it in a way that doesn't allow for the Minotaur to sort of take over and destroy. You'll find that dichotomy is probably the easiest, simplest way of understanding some of what makes the moon in Taurus so beautiful and so deep, and sometimes dark. Anyway, I hope that you find this series useful, that if you know some of the moon in Taurus, you have the moon in Taurus, it fills out your understanding a little bit, just add something cool to it. That is what I've got, but stick around because Kaylee Haynes is going to share with you some of her beautiful moon poetry and take us into a little moon in Taurus immersion. So without further ado, here's Kaylee.
Hello again. My name is Kaylee. I am back with another poem to add to this beautiful series by Adam about the moon through the signs. Today we are doing the moon in Taurus, and I have two spoken word poems for you. One is channeled similar to last time. It came through after listening to Adam's interpretation of the moon in Taurus. And the second one is a poem that I wrote 2 summers ago that I just felt really matched with the energy of the moon in Taurus. I am wearing my moon in Taurus outfit. If you are listening to the recording of this, you won't see it, but if you're on YouTube, then you can see me embodying the Taurus vibes. And I hope you enjoy this poetry. What do you know about this dark earth, this fertile soil from which all things grow? I am the steady drum thrumming deep in your bones. I am the relentless beat of desires you seek to control. I am the vines that creep and bind lovers' limbs and souls. I am the growing heat of bodies kissed by the sun. I am the pleasure of creation and the resting place when all is done. Thank you. That was the first poem. That was the channeled poem. And here's the second one. Bug-bitten rump. I love her. Not because she is beautiful, though she is that. And she's every ugly bug that eats the tree. But no, that is not why I love her. I love her because she is free. And that's the thing, isn't it? The wild doesn't contort to our perfect plan. It follows the will of some invisible hand, shooting sprigs through every pristine block we try to lay. And that's the most beautiful thing, isn't it? That we can't have it our way. that creeping vines obeying the call of the sun will dismantle every perfect prison we try to become and always lead us home. Thank you so much. I am so honored to share my poetry with you and thankful for Adam for including me. And I can't wait for the next episode in the series where I can share more poetry. And bye.